This day and age, we have too much body fat. We're in a constant fed state. The famine has never come. We're just constantly eating every 2 or 3 hours, eating carbohydrates. We're stuck as sugar burners. We're never accessing the body fat. We're never tapping into ketosis, and that's going to lead to a lot of problems. It's going to lead to insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, cancer, brain disorders like Alzheimer's and dementia, obesity, and it's going to make you easy to kill.
Folks, we got a very special guest today. Not that all my guests aren't special, but Ben Azadi is on the show today. Huge when it comes to the ketogenic diet. And it was Cynthia Thurlow. So shout out to Cynthia. Thanks so much for putting us in contact. We're going to have a discussion today about ketogenic diet and all the other awesome things that Ben is up to. So Ben, welcome to the Hard to Kill podcast, man. Thanks so much for showing up. Let's start with who you are and let's get into the ketogenic diet as soon as possible.
Dave, thank you for having me. And for sure, credit to Cynthia Thurlow. She's an incredible friend and resource, and I'm glad she connected us. I love the name of the podcast. That's really what it's about, making yourself harder to kill, because in this society, it's the opposite. We're becoming easier to kill, and that's not what we want. So I'm excited to chat about ancient healing strategies like ketosis to help us become harder to kill.
Amen, brother. Yeah, this was a little bit of backstory as to how I came up with the Hard to Kill brand. I mean, I'm not the only one to talk about this, and there's been others before, but it was partly inspired by CrossFit, partly inspired by Tim Kennedy, and I came up with it on a run. I literally just got fired from a job, and I went for a run to kind of clear my head, and I was going, like I was like 10K, 15K. Maybe I'll do a marathon. I don't know. But during that process, I realized, I'm like, man, when I go for runs, when I go train, I train not just for my health, but I train to literally be harder to kill. I think, how does this benefit me if my family's in danger, if somebody I love is in danger, if I'm in danger? And then I wrote stuff down, and that's kind of how I got to where I am now. And now I get to chat with awesome folks like yourself. And I want to, if I can, just read your about section here. I'm grabbing this totally off the internet so we can give a little pre-frame as to what we're going to be talking about here. But in 2008, you had a personal transformation of shedding 80 pounds. That's huge. And since then, you've been on a mission to help 1 billion people live a healthier lifestyle. Dude, that's amazing. And puts me to shame for my 2 million people. But we're not in a competition here. So let's get into that. How is that weight loss transformation so important for you? And A, how'd you do it? And then why did it inspire you to do what you do now?
Yeah, it was a starting point for me getting into the health and wellness industry. My own personal story was that I was very unhealthy growing up, followed a standard American diet, ate fast food, had really bad behaviors and addictions to drugs and alcohol and to video games and to food. And I was always that kid growing up who was overweight, not just overweight, but actually obese physically, but also mentally obese with really toxic thoughts. And at the age of 23, 24 years old, back in 2008, I made a decision to change things. And that decision came from hitting rock bottom. And I believe that rock bottom could be a beautiful blessing as long as you get out of rock bottom. So for me, my rock bottom was exploring suicide. I was ready to give up because I was just tired of being in pain and crying every day and hurting and very unwell. But I kept thinking about my mom. Every time I explored suicide, the first thought was, what would your mom have to deal with if you took your life? So it stopped me, and I had to figure things out because I knew it was not going to take my life, but I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. So enter books. I started to read books. I started to become obsessed with authors like Bob Proctor and Dr. Wayne Dyer and Tony Robbins and other incredible authors out there. And it just opened up a whole new world to me, Dave, that I never knew existed. And the books helped me take ownership and responsibility. And that's really where it starts. If you want to make a change, whether it's with your health or any area, it starts with taking ownership, starts with taking responsibility, kind of like what you did. And as you've transitioned and created your brand and podcast, it starts with personal responsibility. So a lot of people don't even understand what that word means. Responsibility means to me, your ability to respond to life. That is our responsibility. And if your ability to respond to life is poor, guess what? You're going to get poor results. So for me, my ability to respond to life for 24 years was very poor. I was blaming everyone. I was blaming my genetics, my family members who are enabling me to eat bad food, my slow metabolism, my bad genetics. And then when you take ownership, all that goes away. You stop being the victim of the history and you start to become the victor of your destiny. And that's exactly what I did. I started to move my body. I started to become obsessed with studying fitness and nutrition. I started to eat real food. I didn't really understand diet and nutrition. It started really with P90X, doing workouts at my own home, which evolved actually to CrossFit. I actually ended up opening up a CrossFit gym later on. But P90X, eating whole foods, and I went through this transformation where I lost 80 pounds, as you mentioned, in about 9 months. I went from having 34% fat on my body to down to 6% at my lowest. And really huge transformation. And what I achieved was a physical six-pack, which is great. You know, if that's your goal, you want to look good and have a physical six-pack, which I did back then. But most importantly, a mental six-pack and what it did for my mental health. And it got me really curious. At that time, I was working at a 9-to-5 job. I was a manager at a packing and shipping store. But I went through my health transformation, and it ignited a passion for me to study more nutrition, and people were asking me how I did it. So I started to just personal train some friends and put out ads on Craigslist, and I had strangers coming to my house and I would train them. It was insane. You know, I remember the ad that I put on Craigslist at the time just to get my feet wet was South Florida's most affordable personal trainer. That was my actual ad. I was charging like $25 for an hour, and I would have strangers like reach out and then just come to my house and knock on my door. So it was really a weird thing, but it got me started, and I started to bring in some income where I got to the point where I could actually leave my job. And that's where kind of things went 100% all in with health and nutrition. I started to really get invested as a personal trainer. And that was my forte, was fitness and personal training for many, many years. And that evolved to not just fitness, but also mental health and nutrition and environmental toxicity. And then eventually I became certified as a health coach and transitioned everything to just online platforms with my podcast and all the things that I'm doing. So that was like the backstory from pain to purpose. And somebody's watching or somebody's listening to this and they're going through their rock bottom or they're going through a lot of pain right now. There's a blessing there. Everything is on the way. Nothing is in the way. It's not happening to you. It is happening for you. It's very hard to understand that when you're in it, but once you get to the other side, you'll see that it was all happening for you. So turn those stressors and stress things into blessings, and you're gonna see the difference that it makes. But it starts with taking responsibility.
I literally just was re-listening to my latest podcast episode that I did with Brian Slade, and we were talking about things happening for you. And you're mentioning that's like the secret ingredient, man. Like that mindset component to realize you're not a victim. Everybody's going through something. And if you can reframe it so that you can overcome and be stronger, harder to kill from your experiences, that's where you become kind of unstoppable. And you said I didn't recognize many of the authors you're talking about there, but Tony Robbins was one that I recognize and one that I started following and reading as well and listening to only a few years ago, because up until a few years ago, I was under the impression that folks like him were charlatans. They didn't have anything for me to use of any benefit, because my upbringing was like, you don't need to listen to people like that. You're good the way you are. And the self-improvement thing was shunned, poo-pooed. It was almost seen as just quackery, and therefore don't even bother. So that was my attitude up until like a few years ago. And it's until I started shifting that attitude and that limiting belief, man, like I was stuck. I was really stuck. So it's cool that you have a very similar experience as well. And everybody that I talk to always has that kind of moment where you realize, okay, I need to own my shit. I can't do this anymore. And for you, it was literally life or death. Because had you not changed, that would have been it. And that's one of the greatest motivators of all, in my opinion. So you got the weight off. You started running ads on Craigslist, having randos come to your house and do some workouts, which is bold, my friend. Very bold. I had a similar,
Yes.
yeah, I had a similar type business. I didn't put ads on Craigslist. It was word of mouth, but I was driving all over the city for like $30 an hour, going to people's houses and
Yeah.
like,
Same.
at least they're coming to your house so you could control the environment. I was like, this is
I
the
was doing
best
both though. I was also
Oh,
doing what you did. I was also driving to them too. It was both. It was a combination of both. Yeah. Or going to like a park where like there's an outdoor area. Yeah.
dude, it was so bad because you probably had the same experience. I'd show up and some people like just forgot and I'd be calling like, hey, I'm showing up. You guys ready? Oh yeah. And they had kids, and not to knock they had kids, like I have kids, but like their place was a disaster. And like there's like peanut butter with not like all over the house. And like it's just a nightmare. And I'm trying to do, okay, guys, we're doing some squats. Let's do some push-ups. You know, just not a functional business model. So that business crashed and burned for sure. But cool to see that you cut your teeth and you started somewhere, right? You just said, okay, I'm going to start. And now you've been able to build this empire, this Keto Kamp empire around your own personal experiences. And those are the brands and those are the influencers like yourself that I love to follow because you've lived it. You know what it means to suffer and go through it and have the experience to actually be able to say, hey, this is what I've done. And you can follow this and get the same results. So now that I'm going to call you the keto guy, right? You're like the keto guy. You're the guy that I follow as the keto guy now that Cynthia put me and pointed me towards you. Why is keto and the ketogenic diet? And actually, let's not even get into that first. I think we need to start at the base level. You're the expert. Let's start with the definition of the terms. What is the ketogenic diet? And I guess more specifically, what is ketosis?
Yeah. Ketosis is a metabolic process, and we're all designed to experience this process. There's nothing new about it. It just is nuanced or maybe new to somebody. But the reality is it's not a fad diet. A lot of people consider it a fad diet. There's a lot of misconceptions around keto because it's so popular. It's beginning to become very, very popular. But technically, it's more of a metabolic process than it is a diet. And it's been around for as long as humans have existed. So you want to talk about being harder to kill. One of the main ways that our ancestors were hard to kill is because of this process called ketosis, meaning there were times where our ancestors did not have food available to them. That is a fact. There were famines. There were times where it was the winter and all they had maybe was a kill to eat meat, but there was not really fruits around. There was not really vegetables around. It wasn't the season for that. So by default, their bodies needed to have a energy system available to them that was not sugar and glucose because they were not eating food. And if they did not have the ability to tap over to burning fat and producing ketones, they would have died. They would have been easy to kill. But the fact that we human beings and our ancestors have this ability to metabolically switch and burn fat and produce ketones makes us harder to kill. It's the reason why our ancestors survived famines and food scarcities, because they had the ability to tap into body fat. And that's all body fat is. It's stored energy. And if you fast forward now to the year that we live in, this day and age, we have too much body fat. We're in a constant fed state. The famine has never come. We're just constantly eating every 2 or 3 hours, eating carbohydrates. We're stuck as sugar burners. We're never accessing the body fat. We're never tapping into ketosis. And that's going to lead to a lot of problems. It's going to lead to insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, cancer, brain disorders like Alzheimer's and dementia, obesity, and it's going to make you easy to kill. So ketosis is a great way, a great tool, a great innate intelligence, tapping into the innate intelligence to make yourself harder to kill. So all it means, from a really simple breakdown of what it means to get into ketosis, you are allowing your body to drop insulin and glucose levels. And you do that by lowering your total carbohydrate intake and the frequency of how frequently you eat. And as you lower carbs and lower insulin and glucose, now your body is going to use up your stored sugar. You store sugar in your glycogen stores in your liver and muscle cells. So as you're in this low carbohydrate state, then you're going to tap into body fat. And that body fat is now being used for energy. And those fatty acids are then sent to your liver. And then your liver receives the fatty acids and then produces ketones. And that is ketogenesis, the birth of ketones. And that is a very normal process. We have just forgotten how to tap into this process, and we're in a constant fed state. So my goal is to remind people of this process and teach them how to get in it and how to flex in and out of it efficiently.
Very cool. Very cool. So why then was the ketogenic diet something that appealed to you during your weight loss journey? And I'm making the assumption that you use the ketogenic diet as your main nutritional framework for that 80-pound weight loss.
I didn't actually. I didn't. The way that I lost the weight wasn't a healthy way. It was a very extreme, like counting calories.
Oh, okay.
Exercising 2 to 3 hours a day. So although I got really lean and I was fit, I was not necessarily healthy. I was still dealing with brain fog and digestive issues and skin issues, etc. So it wasn't until 2013, 2014 that I discovered ketosis and intermittent fasting. And that's when I started to research it and implement it. And that's where it made a lot of sense to me that our ancestors did it. And also, just giving it a shot, it felt incredible. So I've learned a lot of things since I started doing keto. That was going to be 10 years ago now. And the way that I lost the weight initially is not the way that I would teach it, because it was just not a healthy way to do it.
Okay. So the counting calories was because that has been the main paradigm, right? For God knows how long, 40 years? Calories in, calories out. I learned a nice little acronym for that, the CECO people, which I thought was pretty cool. I feel like I'm in the club now. So calories in, calories out is a paradigm that I only realized really relatively recently too, maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago, that this model doesn't really work. And the evidence for it is that we have a society that is really obese. We've never seen this before in human history. And our children are obese. So there's something that has to be wrong. Just without even a randomized control study, you can tell something isn't working. So what is it then that is effectively wrong with the way we're eating right now and the way we try to have people lose weight? And then how does the ketogenic diet solve that or provide a better solution?
Yeah, to your point, cutting calories, counting calories, it just doesn't work long term. It might work short term. The body will rebound. You might do some negative things to your metabolism, to your thyroid. So it's not, in my opinion, in my research, in what I've done with people, it's not high on the priority list. And I'm not denying calories, meaning like calories have its place. It's just not important to focus on calories. So what's more important are hormones, are the way that hormones communicate with your receptor sites and the way that your cell metabolism works and inflammation. And that's where what we should be focusing on, not just eating less and moving more. Unfortunately, a lot of people in the health space and the fitness space are still teaching that, dietitians and doctors. And it does people just a huge disservice to just tell them lose weight to get healthy. And the problem with that paradigm is that the body does not lose weight to get healthy. It gets healthy to lose weight. And that's first and foremost how that is flawed, because it's focusing on a symptom. When somebody is overweight, it is not a weight problem, it is a weight symptom. And just like chasing symptoms when it comes to diabetes or other things, it just doesn't work. It's the symptom is actually a good thing. People were brainwashed to believe that disease and symptoms are bad, but in reality, they're a beautiful gift from the innate intelligence. It's the body's check engine light. But you don't just chase the symptoms by cutting calories and focusing on weight loss. You find out what the cause is. It's like when your check engine light turns on in your car, you don't just cover it up and keep driving. You pull the car over and open up the hood and figure out what's going on. So just telling people to eat less and move more, the paradigm is flawed, because that's not how the body loses weight. Weight loss occurs as a side effect of getting healthy. And when you are just telling people eat less, it's equivalent to being at a seminar. Let's say we're at a seminar for understanding how to build wealth. It's a financial seminar with Warren Buffett. Just hypothetically, Warren Buffett is teaching you how to build wealth, and that would
Uncle
be a
Warren.
good person to
Uncle
learn
Warren,
from, right? Because he's a legend. He's one of the richest guys out there. And there's a Q&A section after his lecture, and you raise your hand, Dave, and you're like, Warren, could you just tell me in a sentence or two, like, how do I become rich like you? And he goes, that's easy, Dave. You just have to spend less than you earn. And then he goes on to the next question. You're like, okay, Warren, that makes sense, but it's not giving me the solution. It's the same thing with telling people to eat less and move more. Yeah, that makes sense, but it's not giving you the solution. So how does ketosis help with this? Well, when you lower insulin and glucose, and a lot of people need to do that because they have high levels of glucose and insulin, you lower inflammation, and you allow your hormones to do a better job. So fat loss will occur because you're reducing inflammation. And you are very satisfied and satiated when you're focusing on protein and fat versus a high carbohydrate diet. So combine that with intermittent fasting, it's like a 1-2 punch. And there's other mechanisms at play. If you want to like get into the science real quick, when you're in ketosis, ketones actually communicate with the mitochondria to create more mitochondria, which creates more energy. This is why people feel so good and energized on keto. But as you raise cellular energy, you also raise your basal metabolic rate. So you're actually burning more calories just sitting on your butt each day. So, but you're not focusing on it, right? It's just your body's way of doing it. So there's a lot of mechanisms and reasons why ketosis helps with weight loss. And it helps with weight loss because it's not focusing on weight loss, it's focusing on health. And that is how we lose weight for good, because we get healthy first.
That's so fascinating, because it puts what we've learned over the last 40 years in the corner. It's basically saying, no, this has been totally wrong from the start. And I've had conversations with other interesting guests about the diet heart hypothesis and numerous other things that have just been like, they're flat out wrong. And it's more nuanced. Like you said, it's not, there is a place for calories. There is a place for burning calories, but just to say like, yeah, eat less, do more, it does a disservice. And the focus, from what I understand, what you're saying is we need to be looking at hormones, because hormones are a much better predictor of what your metabolic health is going to look like. And you mentioned mitochondria and basal metabolic rate. These are much more nuanced conversations than just saying, hey, stop eating, let's say, saturated fat, or, you know, quit eating so much butter, quit having so many calories, because if you have too many calories, you're going to get fat. And so how does the ketogenic diet then kind of reframe somebody's mindset with respects to nutrition and health if they're coming from that standard American diet model, and what benefits does somebody, and how fast can somebody really see the benefits of just shifting their macronutrient content to a more ketogenic fat-based diet?
They'll still notice results within 7 days. If they do it the right way, they'll get results within 7 days, more energy. So, weight loss is a side effect, but you're right, because we've villainized saturated fat. We've villainized cholesterol for so many years. And that came out of the 1950s with Ansel Keys, but we're still dealing with it to this day. So it's all about low fat, calorie counting. And a lot of people have woken up and understand that that's not the case. But the way I would explain it to people is this: if you just think about the human body and just study basic biochemistry, we know that inside of the human body, there's about 30 to 70 trillion cells. These cells are required to produce energy, to help you burn fat, to live a long life. It's all about cellular health. My mentor, Dr. Pompa, he once said, if you want to get well, you got to fix the cell. Okay, it's all about the cell. So if you think about the cells and what it's made of, there's a lipid bilayer, a membrane around every cell. That's where the intelligence is. That's where everything gets in. Good things get into the cells because of the membrane. Bad things like toxins and reactive oxygen species get out because of the permeability of the membrane. So the membrane is the most important thing to focus on, because hormones connect to the membrane, nutrients connect to the membrane, oxygen connects to the membrane. If you have inflammation around the membrane, then there's dysfunction, there's symptoms, there's dis-ease. So then I've established how important the membrane is, number one. And then number two, we ask the question, all right, if the membrane is that important, if the membrane is the key to health and longevity, what is the membrane made of? And we know from basic biochemistry that the membrane is made up of 80% fat. And the fats it's made of are the bad words, cholesterol and saturated fat. And the rest of it is protein. Exactly. It's like, ooh, don't say that to your doctor, right? The membrane is made up of protein, saturated fat, and cholesterol. There's no carbohydrates in the membrane. As a matter of fact, in the entire human body, less than 1% is made up of carbohydrates. There's no such thing as essential carbohydrates. There are essential.
Oh, Ben,
proteins.
No, don't say it. Don't tell me, man. Are you serious? Maple syrup isn't essential?
Maple syrup tastes good, but it is not essential, Dave. There's essential proteins, essential fats, but no essential carbs. Now, With that being said, I'm not saying carbs are evil and to avoid them forever. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is like the focus should be quality fats that build the structure of the membrane so your hormones could function better. That's where keto comes into play.
Okay, two questions here. What's a quality fat, and how much fat should we be consuming on the ketogenic diet?
A quality fat would be a saturated fat or a monounsaturated fat. So saturated fats would be like butter, ghee, coconut oil, eggs, red meat, all the bad things your conventional doctor tells you to limit, all the things that the government tells you to avoid. It's like, if you want to get healthy, just look at what the government promotes and do the exact opposite. And you're going to be healthy. It's exactly what I'm talking about.
That's the title of the podcast right there. You want to be healthy, do everything that is opposite of what the government says.
Opposite. Yeah, it's so true. I mean, if you look at, there's a Tufts food compass. Tufts University just came out with this food compass that they're working with President Joe Biden to implement into the government guidelines. And you should look at the chart. Just have your listeners Google the chart. You're going to see they have items in green, items in yellow, items in red. Items in green, they're saying to be encouraged, not just for you, but for your family, for your children. All items in green should be encouraged. Eat them as much as you want. Items in yellow, have them in moderation. Items in red, minimize them. And if you look at that chart, they put Lucky Charms over red meat, eggs, and butter.
I had a rant on this in my car, and I put it on the podcast. It was I saw that and I was like, "This is fake news,
ridiculous.
Right? This is fake news, right?" Like I got sucked in. Like, I got you, Dave. Like, but it's legit. Yeah, it's like you got him upset. Yeah, get the crazy veteran upset. But it's legit, right? This is what they're saying. The American people should be eating more regularly than a steak. Lucky Charms.
You know what's interesting? First of all, it is real. Unfortunately, it's not a joke. There's a study that came out 2021. I don't know if you know this, but let me actually pull it up real quick because it is it's interesting. Because first of all, the premise is this: we've seen in the last few months that there's been an egg shortage. Have you seen that, Dave? An egg shortage?
Yeah, but I'm not tracking that here though. I don't know if that's an American thing and a Canadian thing, but I mean, we eat a lot of eggs. That's one of our primary protein sources. We've always been big egg consumers. We don't eat cereal here. So that's something me and my wife adopted before it was
smart.
Cool.
Yeah. That's the way to do it.
Our kids eat eggs in the morning too, right? It's just like they don't have cereal. They either have eggs or they have Greek yogurt.
That's perfect. I love that idea. In America, there has been an egg shortage, and I'm just pulling this up real quick because I want to share the actual stats with you. Okay, here we go. So the study came out. Well, first of all, before I share the study, I'm going to share. We've seen an egg shortage. Egg prices in the United States have risen 48% since November 2022. So we've seen a shortage of eggs. We've seen some egg warehouses get burned down. We've also seen a 48% increase in the price in the last few months. And then look at this study. This study came out 2021 from the International Immunopharmacology publication. It said, egg yolk antibodies block the binding of multiple SARS-CoV-2 spike protein variants to human ACE2 receptor sites. I'm going to just read this real quick and explain what it means. The SARS-CoV-2 virus is still spreading worldwide, and there is an urgent need to effectively prevent and control this pandemic. This study evaluated the potential efficacy of egg yolk antibodies as a neutralizing agent against COVID. Our results show that the anti-spike from the egg yolk showed significant neutralizing potency against COVID, pseudovirus, various spike protein mutant, and even SARS-CoV-2 in vitro. It might be a feasible tool for prevention and control of ongoing COVID-19. So you think about this study showing eggs actually could help against COVID, and now we see it's harder to get eggs. Is it a coincidence? Is it a conspiracy? I don't know, but it's interesting at the very least.
The world's a crazy place, man. That's it. It's just a cuckoo bananas place to be in right now. Up is down, left is right. Anything that was pre-established as fact is now seen as like disinformation. I don't know what to make of things. And that's partly why I'm glad I'm in the podcasting space and I could talk to people that know stuff like yourself that actually speak some truth. And that's wild. I did not know that that was a thing in the States because I don't watch the news because it ruins my brain. I watch your feed. I'm like, cool. And I have a few other influencers that I follow as well. And I try my best to not have any of that infiltrate my brain space, except when somebody puts up something about Lucky Charms being better than a steak. So, okay. So needless to say, eating eggs is then good because it helps fight SARS-CoV-2. However, there's going to be less and less of them because how dare we eat something that's natural that could prevent against all-cause mortality or something specific like COVID. Gotcha. Okay. So if we go back to the ketogenic diet in and of itself, it's based on a macronutrient ratio, correct? And in that ratio, it defines whether or not you would essentially get into ketosis. Can you explain that a little bit better for the listeners?
Yeah. So in general, most people could get into ketosis if they take their total carbohydrates and drop it below 50 total grams for the day, with those carbs coming from green leafy vegetables and like low glycemic fruits like berries. Most people will get into a state of ketosis just by doing that. Now, some people need to drop it under 30 grams or 20 grams, but most in general, 50 would be the threshold, the upper limit. And at the same time, you want to also increase those healthy fats, right? Saturated fats, monounsaturated fats, increase your protein. You asked the question a little while ago, how much fat should you have? If you're new to keto, the way that I teach it is the first 14 days, I want you to have an abundance of these healthy fats. I want your body to get familiar with breaking down fatty acids. So I teach something called the 2-2-2-2 rule. And you just follow this every day for the first 14 days. And what it is every day you want to consume 2 tablespoons of olive oil or avocado oil, 2 tablespoons of butter or ghee, 2 tablespoons of coconut oil or MCT oil, and then 2 teaspoons of sea salt. So you hit that 2-2-2 rule, you gradually decrease your carbs below 50 grams, and boom, you're in ketosis. Now, after the first 14 days, then you actually want to decrease your fats and focus on protein and only get the fat that comes naturally with the protein. A lot of people think they have to hit a certain percentage with fat in the first 14 days. Yeah, I would say that is true. But after that, your body could get its fat calories, not from the plate of food, but actually from your body fat. So we want to allow that transition. So we actually decrease fat and focus on protein and keep the carbs continuously under 50 grams to stay in ketosis.
Gotcha. Okay. So for context, I did the Ironman last year. Wait, was that last year? 2 years ago? Man, everything's kind of blurred into one. Pretty sure it was last year. Anyways, and I did the math and I realized when I was training, the amount of carbohydrate that I was smashing, the gels, were not agreeing with me. I was having a really hard time keeping them down. I was getting all kinds of gastrointestinal issues. It coupled that with the water, it wasn't working. So I was like, well, I started to panic. I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? So I had somebody on the podcast who's an Ironman and does it in a ketogenic state. He's like, well, have you tried keto? I was like, no, I don't think I could do it. Because I tried it, right? Half the people that I consult with, they're like, oh, I tried keto, it didn't work. I'm like, well, what did you actually do? And because I know what that looks like. All I did was I bought cheese, cream cheese, and I just figured, well, I'll just eat more of this. And this is keto, right? And I felt miserable. Like I just didn't get any benefit. After a week, I literally went to McDonald's because I was driving my kids and they're driving me crazy and I was just hangry. And I just stopped at McDonald's and I just smashed fries and a Big Mac because I couldn't take it anymore. And I just wrote it off as can't do it. This diet sucks. But then once I started doing a bit more research and started breaking those limiting beliefs, I said, okay, I think I can do this. And I listened to Mark Sisson, who I imagine you're probably familiar with.
Yeah.
And I followed his protocol and things started to turn around. I felt better. I wasn't just eating cream cheese. I was eating good, healthy fats. I upped my oil intake, kind of pretty much like what you're talking about here, the 2-2-2-2-2 method, if I got that amount of twos right.
You said it right.
Yeah. And the salt was also something that I was really lacking. And I only found out objectively or, empirically, am I using that term right? I found out that I had a very high, I should say a low level of potassium just after training. So I was excreting potassium at a higher rate than most of my other minerals. And that was because I was getting my urine tested by a friend of mine who's got a lab. So I was like, okay, well, I'll do a ratio of like sodium, potassium. And once I started doing that and I kind of got into the groove, man, I felt like $1,000,000 and I lost 32 pounds.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
like, I wasn't enormous to start with. I was around 230 when I started, but it was just every week I was just constantly losing body fat and it didn't feel like work. Granted, my volume of training was high, but I was able to do the Ironman without any carbohydrates, which I think is awesome. One of those things for a lot of Ironman athletes. It's like, oh, it's heresy, like these keto athletes, but I never felt that, I guess that crash, that feeling of like, everything, the wheels are falling off, the wall. I was tired. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I was a hero. I didn't finish in like record time, but I was able to do it and I was able to operate the next day on an interview on national TV. I was fine. I went for a run on the Monday. I did the Ironman on a Saturday. And I think that is very much attributed to the ketogenic diet because it allowed me to recover and allowed me to have just a better grip of my metabolism. So would you be able to get into a little bit of the science behind how is that really getting deep into like the cellular machinery so that an individual can have a bit more energy? You mentioned mitochondria, but I think for the individual that wants to get involved, they're like, well, what are the tangible benefits of hopping on a diet like this? Because I think most people think, oh, I have to restrict everything and be miserable for, the rest of my life.
Yeah. What you did was impressive and it can be done. Endurance athletes, CrossFit athletes, fitness professionals can do it the right way. It's essentially, I'll address the question you asked in a second, but I want to just pick up about what happened with you when you trained with the keto and why it was so beneficial to you. The analogy that I'm going to give is from Dr. Jason Fung, so I want to give credit to him. But when you're only burning sugar and you're not in ketosis, so you're not burning fat, you're just burning sugar, you essentially have a limited storage capacity. And he relates that to your wallet, right? The benefit of using your wallet, you take out your wallet, you have cash, you could take cash out, put cash in, very easy access. But the drawback, it's limited storage capacity in the wallet, right? But your body fat has much more storage capacity. It's like your bank safe versus the wallet. The drawback to using your bank safe is that it'll take longer to get to. You got to drive to the bank, wait in line, boom, you have access to your bank safe. But the benefit is almost unlimited reserves, right? Your body fat has almost unlimited reserves of calories. Somebody who has 10% body fat, that's super lean, they have 50, 60, 70,000 calories on their body. So when you're metabolically flexible and you're fat adapted like you did with your race, you're going to be able to burn through those sugar reserves, your wallet, and then efficiently have access to your body fat, the bank safe. And then there's more fuel available in that bank safe, the body fat, that you could go through and not bunk, and you could just, ride that wave. And that's exactly what you did. And the recovery part was the fact that ketosis helps lower inflammation. So obviously you're going to create inflammation with a run like that, and then you're going to lower it with recovery with ketosis. So those are the amazing things that happen for you and why a lot of people could be doing this the right way. Mm-hmm. The benefit from a cellular standpoint is the mitochondria. The mitochondria are very, very important. We learned in biology class that it's the energy power plant of the cell, and there's truth to that. The mitochondria produce energy, but it does more than just that. The mitochondria actually move around the cells all the time, and some cells have hundreds of mitochondria, some cells have a few thousand, and some cells actually have over 1 million mitochondria in a single cell. And the way that I believe in God, so the way that God has built the human body is really fascinating, because the cells that are the most important cells, the cells that are most needed for survival and reproduction, are the cells that have the most mitochondria. So the brain, arguably the most important cells, because it's required for thinking, for finding a predator, running away, from getting killed, etc. There's regions of the brain that have 2.5 million mitochondria in a single cell. Compare that to, it's insane. Yeah. and then, compare that to other cells that have a few hundred. But also, what is next? The eyeballs. Eye cells have thousands of mitochondria. The ovaries have about 100,000 in a single cell. Reproduction, the heart loaded with mitochondria. So mitochondria are the name of the game. Every disease out there is pretty much linked to a broken mitochondria. Cancer is a mitochondrial dysfunction disease. Obesity, diabetes, autoimmune disease. I mean, I could go on and on and on. It's a result of the mitochondria not functioning well. So the first role of the mitochondria is to produce energy. It produces ATP, which is like the energy currency. But then it has a dual role. There's actually an intelligence in the mitochondria, and the mitochondria act like a surveillance system. And it is looking for threats. It's looking for cellular threats. When there's too much threats, meaning stress, it actually lowers energy production, all for the sake of survival. So when I say stress comes in three areas: mental, emotional, physical, and then chemical. If there's too much of any of those areas, the mitochondria actually lower energy production. This results in things like somebody getting sick from COVID. Let's say they got really sick and then they recover, but not all the way. So now they have lingering symptoms, long COVID it's called. That's actually a mitochondrial issue. It's called the cell danger response. The mitochondria got stuck in this threat. Now it's constantly lowering energy and you don't recover. Many autoimmune diseases, it's a CDR response. So ketosis is one of the best ways to actually stress the mitochondria. And that might sound like a bad thing, but actually in the right amount, it's actually really, really beneficial. Just like exercise could be beneficial, it's a stress, but in the right amount, you recover. So stress is only bad if you don't adapt to it. But when you adapt to stress, it's super beneficial. So your hard to kill message has to do with this process called hormesis. Have you spoken about hormesis on your show yet?
Oh yeah. Eustress, hormesis. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of hormesis.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly what you teach, right? Hormesis essentially means you apply a stress, allow your body to adapt to the stress, and now you're stronger. The goal is to raise this hermetic window, hermetic ceiling. And ketosis is actually a stress to the mitochondria. It forces them to get stronger. It creates more mitochondria, so it helps with energy production. And at the same time, it's lowering inflammation. So those are two just incredible benefits of ketosis. And the mitochondria, remember, are in the brain, loaded in the brain. So it's really going to help with brain fog, mental clarity, and all these neurological conditions.
Oh, man, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I have to admit, I was on fire for about 6 months. I was using it because I was just dialed in. I was very much dialed in, and I was using intermittent fasting to work through kind of. I knew I had to lose weight because every pound on the bike and running ends up costing you more energy down the road. So I understood the energy balance, but it was the effects of being able to do like 14-hour days that I could never do that before. 14 hours. I did long days as a teacher, don't get me wrong, but I was so exhausted at the end. This way, I was at the end of my day, I'm like, okay, I'm done. Could I go more? Yeah, but I want to spend some time with kids, just do like regular dad stuff. But I was able to wake up pretty much every day. And that was one of the biggest benefits was, oh my God, I feel like a superhuman at this point. And I wish I had just been doing it earlier. And I coupled that. So my three things that I think really helped were intermittent fasting, ketosis, or the ketogenic diet, and breath work, which whole other conversation. But I think those things really helped me out because I didn't have the time to put in all the training hours. I knew that. So I had to find some, I call them hacks to get there a little bit faster. Okay, so the benefits are clear. The diet is a way to not only just lose body fat, which is what most people are just looking at as like a symptom of doing a new nutritional program. But at the metabolic cellular level, you're getting a massive benefit and presumably increasing longevity. But somebody hears this and goes, yeah, okay, Ben, cool. But I understand like my ATP, I get a little bit more, I'm a little bit more dialed in, I lose some body fat, but I'm eating a lot more cholesterol and fat. Isn't that going to make my heart explode? How now do you have that conversation with somebody that just can't get past that limiting belief?
Yeah, great question. I would say that number one, more people die with heart disease with normal to low cholesterol than high cholesterol. Number one, that's a fact.
Salacious.
Yeah. And then number two, cholesterol is so important for many, many factors. It's important for the liver. It's important for your sex hormones. It's important for the brain. Brain's mostly fat. Your cell membranes, we established, mostly fat. It's made up of cholesterol. So that's very important. And saturated fat is not what is causing heart attacks. If that was the case, there would be saturated fat in occluded arteries that are restricted and leading to strokes. But there's zero saturated fat in occluded arteries. Zero. Cholesterol is a band-aid. Cholesterol is there to repair the damage from inflammation. So just blaming cholesterol it's like similar to this. It's like there's a fire in your neighborhood and this house is on fire, and you drive by and you see all these firefighters trying to put out the fire, and you think, man, every time there's a fire, I always see firefighters at the scene of the crime. Therefore, I'm going to make the assumption that the firefighters are causing the fire, right? It's the same thing with cholesterol, because they look at heart attack victims and people who have heart attacks, and they see all this cholesterol built up, and they blame the cholesterol for being there. But it was there, like the firefighters were there to actually put out the damage. So cholesterol is very important. I'm more concerned when somebody has a cholesterol under 200 than anything else. We don't want low cholesterol. Low cholesterol is dangerous. It throws off your nitric oxide levels. It actually increases your risk of heart disease. So I would just educate them on that. That's what I would do.
Yeah, that's super important. That education piece, which it's funny because we don't get really educated on nutrition. I taught grade 9 science here, and the only part of the curriculum from kindergarten we go to grade 11 here. The only part of that entire curriculum, that whole progression that we talk about nutrition, is in grade 9, and it's one, and I stretched it out to 2 lessons on what are protein, carbs, and fats. And then it's all about, hey, if you want to stay lean, reduce your calories and do more. And aside from that, that is basically it. And it's such a disservice to everybody in our society that we don't even have a conversation about it, because we just assume that, our parents know how to teach us how to eat. But if you look at what kids are eating in a lunchroom, whoa, it is bad. So I'm not surprised that people are struggling, because whatever they learned is from somewhere else. And I can only assume it's from what they hear on TV and what companies and even the medical establishment are suggesting people do. And like you said, they got Lucky Charms now on the top of a chart that's better than a steak. And that's definitely going to influence people, or else they wouldn't put it out, right? So you're trying to help 1 billion people. So here's the question of the day. How are you going to fix the planet? In one sentence or less. Go ahead.
So yeah, it's a tough question.
It's only a fifth, and only a seventh of the entire world's population.
I know, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Audacious.
Just a matter of getting the message out there as much as possible. And the cool thing about the world that we live in is we have platforms like this, podcasts, social media, there's conferences. So just being so committed, not interested, but being committed to getting the message out there as much as possible, and to to take the complication out of things, to take all the clutter, all the noise, and deliver it to people in these bite-sized nuggets. Because when you start getting too sciencey with some people, it just goes over their head and they're confused. So I do my best to use analogies and to break it down to a very practical level. But to answer your question, how am I going to do that? How are we going to do that? We're just continuing to have conversations like this to people who are ready to hear the message, be relentless, be committed, show up every single day, create podcasts, create contents, write new books, speak on more stages. That's how we're going to get there.
I love it. The The future is really in the hands of folks like yourself when it comes to fitness and health, because I think people are slowly coming to the realization that their GP, their doctor, is not the single voice of truth that they necessarily need to be listening to. And I love the analogy that Kelly Starrett used, and a few other folks have used too. You know, your doctor is basically like a lifeguard. If you're drowning, they're going to come save you. That's their job. They're going to make sure that you don't die. But they're not your swim coach. They're not going to say, hey, wait, maybe you shouldn't get back in that water, dude. You don't know how to swim. You're going to show back up and they're going to pull you out. They're going to give you CPR. They're going to make sure you're good to go. But that's the personal responsibility part that you started the conversation off with, that I think a lot of us are lacking because we've abdicated it to our health professionals, so to speak. And now we're dealing with the consequences of that, where before we were responsible, our grandparents were responsible, our great-grandparents were responsible, but we've gotten to the point where I think we need to look deep into ourselves and realize, hey, maybe I don't know everything, and maybe I need to start listening to Ben and what he has to say, because clearly he's getting results, even though he's not a doctor, which I think is a big hurdle for a lot of people. But I love what you're doing, man. So you have a podcast as well. Well, you have a bunch of stuff. Why don't you give the listeners an idea of where they can find you and what the best means of getting a hold of you is?
Yeah, and that's a great analogy from Kelly. I actually haven't heard that one before, but it makes a lot of sense. Right now, for the most part, people who are listening to podcasts like this, people who are getting educated, they actually know more about nutrition and health than their actual doctor. They're at their consultation and they actually know more than their doctor. That's the name of the game these days. So that's super cool that we see that. But yes, I have a podcast. It's called the Keto Kamp podcast. Kamp is spelled with the K. We are 534 episodes in. We release a new episode 3 times a week, sometimes 4 times a week. We're super committed, super consistent. We also have a great YouTube channel, Keto Kamp on YouTube. We're on all social media platforms. And I also have my book right behind me. You can see right there, Keto Flex is my latest book, where I kind of outline my 4 pillars and teach a little bit more about diabetes and just this amazing process of ketosis.
That's awesome. You've had some pretty wicked guests on your podcast. Not going to lie, it's one of my top podcasts now for the last few months. So you bring a lot of energy to that podcast. And for our community here, the Hard to Kill community, definitely give that one a listen. And I'll put the links here in the show notes as well.
Thank you.
So Ben, I know we just scratched the surface here when it comes to what you're up to and all the information and all the knowledge that you have, but I think it's going to go a long way to get somebody just putting their toes in the water. And that's what we're trying to do here. That's what I'm trying to do here, is just bring the information to the veteran community, to the sheepdog communities, I like to call them, to get them just healthier, because I really think that this is part of a global effort to get serious and take major responsibility for your own health, because I truly believe that's the only way we're going to tackle our big global issues. If you're not well, how could you possibly take on a topic like global warming or COVID or anything that you could possibly imagine that are these big overarching topics if you're not healthy? Because if you're not healthy, that's the only thing that matters at the end of the day. So I love your message, and I'd love to be able to have another chat down the road. So folks, before we sign off, Ben, do you have any other words of wisdom before we wrap up here?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I appreciate you, Dave. I love the work that you're doing, and you're so right. You know, health is wealth. If you treat your health casually, you will end up a casualty. You're just going to be another statistic, and you don't want to do that. That is not the way to live your life. When you're unhealthy, not only are you suffering, but everybody around you suffers. The world suffers. You can't contribute. You can't make a positive impact. Health is wealth. It really is. The body is just the vessel for our soul, and we want to use this vessel as long as possible to do great things. So don't treat your health casually. Treat it with importance. Take responsibility. Continue showing up, listening to podcasts like this, but not just listening, taking action. Information alone is not going to save your life or change your life. It's the application. It's the action of the information. So don't just listen and don't apply. Listen and apply, experiment, see what works for you. There's a lot of people that are brilliant out there. Dave has brought a lot of great people to his show. There's a lot of people who disagree. People are conflicting, and that's fine. Pick and choose, experiment, see what works for you, discard what doesn't work for you, but apply. Don't just absorb, actually apply the info. That would be the last words of wisdom for your audience.
I love it, man. Execute, execute, execute. Love it. All right, Ben. Thanks so much, man. This has been a wicked conversation. And folks, don't forget, train hard, fight easy. We'll see you on the next one. Peace.